In the chilly dawn of 1491, nestled in the misty countryside of England, a robust baby boy was born into the Tudor household with a destiny as grand as the looming towers of Westminster Abbey. This was Henry Tudor, the second son of the cautious yet pragmatic King Henry VII and the gentle Queen Elizabeth of York. Their marriage was no candlelit romance but a strategic chess move designed to end the bloody Wars of the Roses. A union where love was less candlelight and more political floodlight. At Henry's older brother, Arthur, was the original heir apparent, named after the legendary King Arthur himself, because even back then, branding mattered more than you'd think. But fate, as unyielding as the damp English weather, had other plans. Arthur married the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon but died young, leaving Henry to inherit not just the throne but also Arthur's widow. From that moment, Henry developed a habit of taking what wasn't initially his, and history would soon take notice. Nearly 6 feet tall, towering in an era where the average height barely reached 5'6", Henry was a Renaissance powerhouse. His broad shoulders filled his doublets magnificently, his auburn hair shimmered like polished mahogany under the candlelight, and his piercing blue eyes warned challengers with a silent, "Think twice." Handsome, athletic, and radiating ambition mixed with the lingering scent of roasted venison, Henry was the Tudor equivalent of a modern-day heartthrob. His education was impeccable. Latin, French, theology, music, poetry. He mastered them all, composing sonnets that echoed through the halls of his palaces and playing the lute with surprising skill. He jousted with the confidence of a man wielding both sword and divine right, wrestling courtiers into submission when needed, and carried himself like the star of a royal Renaissance festival. Henry VIII's father, Henry VII, was about as exciting as a tepid cup of tea, gray, suspicious, and unappetizing. So when the elder Henry passed the crown in 1509, the 17-year-old Henry VIII took the throne with youthful enthusiasm and a determination to be remembered as England's greatest monarch. His first official act? Marrying the very same Spanish princess, Catherine of Aragon, who had been his brother's wife. Nothing says new beginnings like recycling a royal marriage, right? In his early reign, Henry was genuinely beloved. He embodied youthful energy and generosity, obsessed with chivalric ideals, elaborate pageantry, and declaring himself Europe's most magnificent sovereign. His feasts were legendary. Imagine enormous roasted swans, fountains flowing with wine, and velvet so abundant it could clothe an entire medieval boy band. Music was Henry's true passion. He composed Pastime with Good Company, a song celebrating friendship and loyalty. Somewhat ironic coming from a man whose court would become notorious for sycophants, spies, and the occasional severed head. But hey, everyone goes through edgy phases. Physically, Henry was a tour de force. Jousting was his extreme sport, tennis, the real kind, not the modern game, his pastime, and he maintained an athletic physique with religious dedication. He was essentially a Tudor fitness enthusiast who just happened to wear a crown. Religiously, Henry started as a staunch Catholic, even penning a treatise against Martin Luther that earned him the papal title Defender of the Faith. The irony? He would later burn that same papal relationship to the ground to satisfy his personal whims. Henry believed he was God's divinely appointed king, meaning whatever he desired was morally justified. This self-assurance, while handy for a monarch, often led to catastrophic outcomes. By his late 30s, the Golden Prince's image had tarnished. Impatience, suspicion, and tyranny began to cloud his rule. Anyone who failed to mirror his self-love risked losing their head. Literally. Who was Henry truly? A boy never meant for kingship who found himself wearing the crown. A young man who dazzled his kingdom with promise. A ruler whose craving for legacy, military glory, and male heirs overshadowed his better qualities. He loved music, theology, elaborate armor, and women, rarely all at once, and maintained until his last breath the conviction that he acted not just rightly, but divinely. And then there were the wives. 6 matrimonial alliances that shaped, and sometimes shattered, England's history. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. A mnemonic that has echoed through time, reducing 6 complex women to mere fates. But behind this rhyme lies a rich tapestry of passion, betrayal, religious upheaval, political maneuvering, and one man's complicated relationship with power and love. First was Catherine of Aragon, the dignified Spanish princess who married Henry after her first husband's death. She bore him a daughter, Mary, but no surviving sons, a failure that would doom their union. For 16 years, Catherine was England's respected queen, displaying grace and political acumen. Yet Henry's desperation for a male heir and Catherine's refusal to quietly step aside sparked a historic showdown. When she denied the annulment he demanded, Henry broke from Rome, established the Church of England, and declared himself its supreme head, a move that would forever alter the religious landscape. Next came Anne Boleyn, witty, sharp-tongued, and fiercely ambitious. She refused to be just another mistress and demanded the crown. Her spirited independence enchanted Henry but eventually threatened his control. Though she bore a daughter, Elizabeth, she failed to produce a son. Accused of adultery, incest, and treason, charges widely believed to be fabricated, and was executed. Yet her daughter Elizabeth would become England's most celebrated monarch. Jane Seymour followed, a quiet, submissive contrast to Anne's fire. She gave Henry his long-desired male heir, Edward, but died shortly after childbirth. Henry mourned her genuinely, requesting to be buried beside her, a romantic gesture from a man not known for sentimentality. Anne of Cleves was Henry's fourth wife, a political match based on a flattering portrait. Upon meeting her, Henry famously declared she resembled a Flanders mare. Their marriage was never consummated, and Henry sulked like a child denied his favorite toy. Anne, however, handled the situation with grace, securing a generous settlement and living out her days as the king's beloved sister. Catherine Howard, Anne Boleyn's cousin, was a teenager thrust into a deadly game. Young, vivacious, and woefully unprepared, she briefly brought excitement to Henry's aging court. But past indiscretions and possible ongoing affairs led to her downfall. Henry wept before ordering her execution, the second queen to lose her head. Lastly, Catherine Parr, intelligent, educated, and twice widowed, served as nurse and companion to the morbidly obese, chronically ill king. She cared for his children, soothed his moods, and navigated court politics with skill. Secretly a Protestant sympathizer, she subtly promoted religious reform. Catherine outlived Henry and remarried for love, though her happiness was short-lived as she died in childbirth the following year. Thus ends the saga of Henry VIII, a man who began as a golden Renaissance prince and ended a tyrant who transformed England to satisfy personal desires, discarded queens like ill-fitting garments, and, despite his obsession with a male heir, saw his legacy continue through his daughters. Behind the infamous rhyme lies a Shakespearean epic filled with heartbreak, ambition, betrayal, and those ridiculously puffy sleeves that Tudor fashion inexplicably embraced. But the story is far from over. Beneath the grandeur and bloodshed, secrets lurk, alliances tremble, and the echoes of a king's choices ripple through time, waiting for their next chapter to unfold. The morning fog clung stubbornly to the rolling hills surrounding Canterbury, its damp fingers weaving through the narrow cobblestone streets like a lingering secret. In a modest yet respectable manor on the edge of town, a girl was born who would unknowingly set in motion a chain of events destined to reshape England's very soul. Her name was Annabel Bolton, and though her origins were humble compared to the gilded halls of Westminster, her story would intertwine with kings and queens, ambition and tragedy. In ways no one could foresee, Annabel's family was part of the ambitious but not quite noble Bolton clan. Landowners and courtiers who hovered just beneath the peerage, always reaching, always hoping. Her father, Thomas Bolton, was a silver-tongued diplomat whose charm was rivaled only by his relentless drive. Her mother, Elizabeth Howard, hailed from an ancient noble line, bringing connections that whispered of opportunity. Together, they invested heavily in Annabel's future, determined she would rise beyond the limitations of her birth. Unlike many girls of her age, Annabel's education was a rich tapestry of languages, music, and courtly etiquette. By her early teens, she spoke French and Latin with the ease of a native, danced with the grace of a court lady, and wielded wit sharper than the finest blade. Her dark, expressive eyes sparkled with mischief and intelligence beneath a cascade of chestnut hair that caught the light like burnished copper. A slender neck adorned with a simple pearl necklace gave her an air of understated elegance, while the faintest hint of a knowing smile played about her lips, as if she held secrets meant only for kings. At 17, Annabel was sent abroad to serve in the sophisticated court of Archduchess Margaret of Burgundy in the Netherlands, a hub of diplomacy and culture. There, amid the swirl of Flemish tapestries and whispered intrigues, she learned the art of influence. How a glance could disarm, how silence could speak volumes, and how power often came not from birthright but from the deft manipulation of circumstance. Her continental education continued in the glittering courts of France. Serving Queen Claudette, wife of the flamboyant King Francis I, Annabel soaked up the Renaissance's vibrant mix of art, philosophy, and seduction. She dressed in gowns of deep velvet and shimmering silk, the rich fabric hugging her lithe frame, her sleeves delicately embroidered with golden thread that caught the candlelight. Her French hood, set at a rakish angle, framed a face that was both alluring and inscrutable. Here, she perfected the intoxicating blend of charm and intellect, the kind of presence that made even the most powerful men pause and take heed. Returning to England, Annabel was transformed. No longer merely an ambitious country girl, she was a woman who moved with continental grace, spoke with eloquence, and wielded her allure like a finely honed weapon. Her reputation preceded her. A lady who could hold a room with a mere glance, whose laughter was as bright as summer, yet whose heart remained a closely guarded mystery. It was at the Tudor court, under the ever-watchful eye of King Henry VIII, that Annabel's destiny truly ignited. The king, now approaching his 30s and growing restless, was increasingly dissatisfied with his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, which had produced only one surviving child, a daughter named Mary. Henry's obsession with securing a male heir was becoming an all-consuming fire, and his gaze had already wandered among the ladies of court. Annabel's elder sister, Mary Bolton, had briefly caught the king's eye as a mistress, a fleeting fancy discarded like so many before her. But Annabel was different. When Henry's interest turned to her, she did something unprecedented. She refused him. In a court where royal whims were law and defiance meant death, Annabel's refusal was a bold gamble. She would not be another mistress, another temporary pleasure to be cast aside. If Henry wanted her, he would have to do what no English king had done before: marry her and crown her queen. This audacious stance thrilled and frustrated Henry in equal measure. Accustomed to instant gratification, he found himself captivated by the one woman who dared say no. His pursuit became a consuming passion, his letters pleading, promising, and proclaiming a devotion that swept away politics and reason. But the stakes were perilously high. To marry Annabel would mean dissolving his marriage to Catherine, a union backed by powerful alliances, notably with Spain. The Pope, under the influence of Emperor Charles V, Catherine's nephew, was reluctant to grant an annulment. Thus began a diplomatic stalemate that dragged on for years, during which Annabel's position at court grew ever more precarious. Henry's solution would be revolutionary. Guided by his chief minister Thomas Cromwell, he embraced the radical idea that the English monarch, not the distant Pope in Rome, should be supreme head of the Church of England. The Act of Supremacy in 1534 formalized this break, shattering centuries of religious tradition and launching the English Reformation. Amid this whirlwind, Henry and Annabel married in secret. By the time she was crowned queen at Westminster Abbey in the summer of 1533, Annabel was already expecting their child, a daughter named Elizabeth. Henry's disappointment was palpable. A son had been his obsession, and a daughter was, at best, a consolation prize. Annabel doted on Elizabeth, recognizing in her the spark of intelligence and determination that mirrored her own. Yet, the queen's time on the throne was fraught with peril. The court, still loyal to Catherine and wary of this new queen, whispered and schemed. Annabel's outspoken nature and support for religious reform made her powerful enemies. Her relationship with Henry, once passionate, cooled as the years wore on. Miscarriages and the absence of a male heir deepened the king's frustrations. When Henry's affections shifted toward one of Annabel's ladies-in-waiting, the gentle and demure Jane Seymour, Annabel's enemies seized their chance. Accusations of adultery, incest, and treason, fabricated and cruel, were leveled against her. Her arrest was swift, her trial a mere formality. Even faced with certain death, Annabel defended herself with eloquence and dignity, winning the reluctant admiration of her judges. On a grim morning in May 1536, dressed in a somber gown and her distinctive French hood, Annabel walked to the scaffold within the Tower of London. With a voice steady and clear, she praised Henry as a sovereign lord and asked the people to pray for him, a final act of political calculation to protect her daughter's future. Kneeling, she commended her soul to Jesus Christ before the sword fell in a single, clean stroke. She was 35, queen for just under 3 years, and left behind a daughter who would one day eclipse both her parents in fame. Annabel Bolton's physical life ended that morning, but her legacy had only just begun. The religious reforms her marriage had necessitated evolved into a distinct Anglican tradition. Elizabeth, her daughter, would reign for 44 years, ushering in a golden age of English power and culture and the hush of the Tower's ancient stone. Shadows whispered of secrets yet untold. Behind the fall of the Queen lay mysteries. Who truly orchestrated her demise? What hidden alliances shifted in the corridors of power? And what of Elizabeth, the red-haired girl sent away, marked by her mother's fate but destined to rule a kingdom transformed? The Tudor saga was far from over. As one queen's head fell, another star was rising. The game of crowns, power, and survival continued, its next move poised to shake the very foundations of England. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the court, a letter sealed with a forgotten crest waits patiently to be discovered, a hint of a conspiracy that could rewrite history itself. The chill of early spring brushed the quiet town of Wiltshire, where the stately Wolf Hall stood resilient amidst budding trees and the soft murmur of the nearby river. It was here, in this serene estate owned by the Seymour family, that a young woman named Jane Seymour blossomed quietly into the life that history often whispers about but seldom shouts. Jane was a study in contrasts. Where Annabel Bolton had dazzled with fiery intellect and continental flair, Jane embodied a gentle strength cloaked in modesty and careful reserve. She moved through the halls of Wolf Hall with a grace that was unassuming yet unmistakably regal. Her light brown hair gathered neatly under a simple coif, her slender figure often draped in soft hues of cream and sage that complemented her fair complexion. Her features were delicate, with a small mouth set in a thoughtful line and eyes that held a quiet depth. Eyes that observed, listened, and learned without drawing unnecessary attention. Jane was not the queen who commanded the room with a sharp tongue or dazzling wit. She was the steady presence, the soothing balm in a court rife with tempestuous ambition and intrigue. Born into a family of solid if unspectacular nobility, Jane's upbringing was shaped by discipline, obedience, and a deep-rooted piety. Her father, Sir John Seymour, was a loyal servant to the crown, while her mother, Marjorie Wentworth, was known for her gentle wisdom and unwavering faith. Jane's education was traditional needlework, music, household management, but beneath this quiet exterior lay a keen intelligence and an intuitive understanding of the dangerous dance of court politics. Jane first entered the Tudor court as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon, where she witnessed the slow unraveling of a marriage that had once promised stability but now simmered with tension. Later, she served Anne Boleyn, watching the fiery queen's meteoric rise and tragic fall with a mixture of caution and quiet sorrow. Unlike her predecessors, Jane chose a path of careful navigation rather than confrontation. She understood the power of silence and the strength of patience, skills that would serve her well in the perilous world of Henry VIII's court. When Henry's heart grew restless again, turning away from Anne Boleyn's fierce independence, Jane's steady presence caught his eye. Her demure smile and gentle manner were a balm to the king's restless spirit, and unlike the tempestuous queens before her, Jane did not challenge or provoke. She accepted Henry's attentions with grace, never overstepping the delicate boundaries that separated favor from folly. Their marriage in May 1536, barely 2 weeks after Anne's execution, was swift and understated. No grand celebrations, no prolonged court festivities. Jane was everything and was not: mild, compliant, and politically cautious. She restored order to the royal household, mending the strained relationships Henry's previous marriages had fractured. Especially between the king and his daughters, her influence was subtle but significant. She used her position to advocate for the restoration of Catholic monasteries, one of the few times she dared to gently challenge the king, and worked quietly behind the scenes to stabilize a court still reeling from upheaval. Jane's greatest triumph, however, was yet to come. In the autumn of 1537, after a grueling 2-day labor, She gave birth to the long-awaited male heir, Prince Edward. The kingdom rejoiced. The Tudor dynasty seemed secured at last. But joy was fleeting. Weakened by childbirth, Jane succumbed to childbed fever just 12 days later. Her death plunged the court into genuine mourning. Henry, often mercurial and impatient, wore black for months, a rare and heartfelt display of grief, and insisted on a queen's funeral befitting the mother of his son. Jane Seymour's brief reign left no scandal, no rebellion, no disgrace. She was the quiet dove among roaring lions, a gentle whisper in a court of shouts. Her legacy was a son who would one day become King Edward VI and a memory that softened even Henry's hard heart. Yet, as the court slowly recovered from this loss, a new chapter beckoned. A tale of foreign alliances, political gambits, and a portrait that would change the course of a kingdom. Far across the sea, in the disciplined and modest Duchy of Cleves, another young woman prepared unknowingly for a destiny entwined with England's turbulent throne. Born Anna of Cleves, she was the daughter of Duke John III and Maria of Ulichburg. Raised in a world where decorum and duty shaped every step, Anna's world was quiet compared to the glittering chaos of the Tudor court. Her upbringing emphasized humility and grace. Her gowns were simple yet elegant, favoring muted tones that spoke of restraint rather than extravagance. She was taught to manage households, sew with skill, and conduct herself with measured dignity. A stark contrast to the flamboyant queens who had preceded her. Meanwhile, in England, King Henry VIII, now nearing 50, was a shadow of the golden prince he once was. His body bore the marks of years of excess. Corpulent, plagued by a festering leg ulcer that oozed constantly and filled rooms with its putrid scent. His temper, once fiery, now simmered unpredictably, and his desperation for political alliances and a male heir drove his decisions. In 1539, Henry's advisors looked to the Protestant Duchy of Cleves as a strategic partner against Catholic powers. Anna's name appeared on the list of eligible brides, and the king, ever the romantic, at least in his own mind, wanted to know exactly what he was agreeing to. Hans Holbein, the court's master painter, was dispatched to capture Anna's likeness. The portrait that arrived was flattering. A serene young woman with a gentle smile and composed demeanor. Smitten by the image, Henry agreed to the marriage without seeing Anna in person. But when Anna arrived in England in January 1540, reality struck like a cold slap. Henry's attempt at romantic mischief, bursting into her chambers in disguise, was met with polite confusion rather than delight. The Queen's modesty and restraint clashed with Henry's expectations, and he quickly declared she resembled a Flanders mare. A remark that, while cruel, underscored the gulf between image and reality. The marriage took place but was never consummated. Henry sulked like a child, denied his favorite toy, and the union was disastrous from the start. Yet Anna proved herself remarkably astute. Rather than fighting a losing battle, she accepted an annulment graciously, citing pre-contracts and lack of consummation. In return, she secured a generous settlement. Palaces, lands, jewels, and the honorable title of the king's beloved sister. In a court where most wives met bitter ends, Anna of Cleves did the unthinkable. She walked away free, respected, and content. But just as the kingdom sighed in relief, a new tempest approached. One draped in youthful laughter, chestnut curls, and a dimpled smile that would soon captivate the aging king once more. Catherine Howard, a girl barely 17, entered the Tudor stage like a breath of reckless summer air. Born into the ambitious but financially strained Howard family, Catherine was cousin to the infamous Annabel Bolton and niece to the powerful Duke of Norfolk. Her early years were marked by neglect. After her mother's death, Catherine was sent to the chaotic household of her step-grandmother, the formidable Duchess Agnes Howard, where supervision was lax and the line between innocence and indiscretion blurred. Within these walls, Catherine's youthful heart was entangled in forbidden dances of flirtation and secret rendezvous. Her music teacher's lingering touches and the bold ambitions of young suitors left marks that would later shadow her reign. When Catherine arrived at court as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Anna of Cleves, her vivacious spirit and sparkling eyes caught Henry's weary gaze. To a man whose body betrayed him daily, Catherine was a miracle, a radiant bloom in a garden of withering roses. Their marriage in July 1540 was swift, but the dangers lurking beneath the surface soon surfaced. Past indiscretions, secret lovers, and whispered scandals became weapons wielded with deadly precision. When the king discovered Catherine's betrayals, his heartbreak turned to fury, and the court that had once celebrated her youth now plotted her downfall. Catherine's final days were marked by despair and hysteria, confined and stripped of royal title. On a bleak February morning in 1542, dressed in black velvet with her hair loose around her shoulders, she faced the executioner's block with a courage born of desperation. Her brief, tragic life serves as a haunting reminder of a girl caught in the merciless machinery of power, punished not just for her mistakes but for the very nature of her youth. And as Catherine's laughter faded into history's shadows, a new queen emerged, one whose intellect and resilience would challenge even Henry's turbulent reign. Catherine Parr, twice widowed and twice tested, entered the Tudor stage not as a tempest but as a steady current, guiding a kingdom through storms both political and spiritual. Born into England's educated gentry, Catherine's upbringing was marked by humanist learning and deep religious conviction. Fluent in multiple languages and well-versed in theology, she was a woman of substance in a court often ruled by spectacle. When Henry's gaze turned to her in 1543, he saw in Catherine the wisdom and serenity that had long eluded him. Though his health was failing and his temper volatile, Catherine navigated the treacherous waters of court with grace, skillfully balancing devotion and subtle influence. As queen, she fostered intellectual engagement, surrounding herself with scholars and poets, and became the first English queen to publish books under her own name, a bold act in an era suspicious of female authorship. Her greatest achievement was perhaps her role as stepmother, healing fractured relationships and nurturing the minds of the future monarchs, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward. Yet even Catherine Parr's tenure was fraught with peril. Religious factions eyed her growing influence with suspicion, and rumors of her Protestant sympathies threatened her standing. When a warrant for her arrest surfaced, Catherine's political acumen shone. She pleaded her case before Henry, weaving a tapestry of loyalty and humility that spared her from the fate that had claimed so many before her. Upon Henry's death in 1547, Catherine retreated from the throne but not from history. She married for love, bearing a daughter before dying in childbirth, her life a testament to resilience, intellect, and quiet strength. Thus concludes a chapter of Tudor saga, a tapestry woven with ambition, love, betrayal, and survival. Yet, as the shadows lengthen over England's turbulent courts, a new mystery stirs in the quiet corridors of power. A sealed letter, hidden away in the depths of a forgotten chamber at Hampton Court, bears a cryptic emblem, a rose entwined with a serpent, whose hand penned this enigmatic message. What secrets does it hold? And how might it reshape the fate of a kingdom still trembling beneath the weight of crowns and crowns lost? The Game of Thrones is never truly over, and in England, where history's echoes never quiet, the next move waits to be made. The heavy tapestries in the great hall of Hampton Court muffled the footsteps of Sir Thomas Cromwell as he entered with measured purpose. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the stone walls, and the faint scent of damp wood mingled with the sharp tang of ink and parchment. On a polished oak table lay a sealed letter, its wax emblem, a rose entwined with a serpent, gleaming ominously. Cromwell's sharp eyes narrowed. This was no ordinary correspondence. The symbol bespoke a clandestine message, whispered secrets folded into a delicate cipher. It was the kind of intrigue that could unravel alliances and topple thrones. The Tudor court was a labyrinth of shifting loyalties and whispered betrayals, and Cromwell, master of shadows and steel, was its most cunning navigator. Yet even he felt a flicker of unease as he broke the seal and unfolded the parchment within. The letter spoke of a hidden faction within the court, a secret cabal determined to influence the succession, to bend the crown to their own ends. Names were veiled in metaphor, but the threats were clear. Plots to discredit the young Princess Elizabeth, to diminish the power of the Seymours, and to reignite religious strife that could plunge England back into chaos. Cromwell's mind raced. The recent years had already tested the kingdom's fragile peace. The death of Henry VIII had left a boy king, Edward VI, too young to rule alone, with regents wielding power behind the throne. The religious reforms were accelerating, unsettling traditionalists and reformers alike. Now, beneath the surface, a new storm brewed. The letter hinted at players both noble and obscure, weaving a web that ensnared friend and foe indiscriminately. It warned of secret meetings in the shadowed corners of Westminster, coded messages passed beneath the guise of court festivities, and alliances forged in whispered oaths. As Cromwell folded the letter, a faint sound echoed from the corridor, a soft footfall, deliberate yet cautious. He replaced the parchment and turned sharply, ready to confront an intruder. But the passage was empty, save for the lingering scent of lavender and something darker, fear. Outside, the court hummed with unaware revelry. Nobles adorned in silken garments embroidered with gold and jewels paraded through the galleries. Ladies in flowing gowns with tightly laced bodices and delicate lace collars exchanged gossip beneath towering ceilings frescoed with Tudor roses. The air was thick with perfume and tension. Among them moved Elizabeth Tudor herself, the red-haired princess whose very existence was both a symbol of hope and a target of suspicion. She was slender and watchful, her pale skin contrasting with the vivid flame of her hair. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed a mind far older than her years. Draped in deep green velvet trimmed with ermine, she wore a modest yet elegant gown, the subtle sparkle of a sapphire pendant resting against her throat. A gift from a loyal courtier, perhaps, or a token of hidden allegiance. Elizabeth's thoughts were a tempest. Her mother's fate haunted her like a shadow she could neither outrun nor fully embrace. The court's whispers branded her illegitimate, her claim to the throne questioned. Yet beneath her composed exterior burned a fierce determination to survive and to one day rule nearby. The young King Edward VI was schooled in the arts of kingship, his pale hands gripping the heavy volumes of theology and law. His health was frail, his reign precarious, and the regents who governed in his name juggled power with varying degrees of ambition and integrity. The Seymours, led by Edward's uncle, wielded influence but faced enemies eager to exploit any weakness. Among them were Catholics longing for a return to the old faith and Protestants divided over the pace and nature of reform. And this volatile mix, secrets were the currency of survival, and trust was a rare and precious commodity. As night deepened, a masked ball was held in the palace's grand chambers, an event designed to display power and unity but often serving as a stage for clandestine meetings and veiled threats. Elizabeth, cloaked in a midnight blue gown embroidered with silver stars, glided through the crowd with the grace of a seasoned diplomat. Her mask, delicate and adorned with feathers, concealed her identity, allowing her to move among nobles and spies alike. In a shadowed alcove, she exchanged a brief, loaded glance with a mysterious figure, an envoy from the continent whose allegiance was as uncertain as the flickering candlelight. Words were whispered, words that hinted at alliances, betrayals, and a plan to secure Elizabeth's future amid the turbulence. Yet, even as plans were laid and loyalties tested, the letter's warnings echoed. In the back of every mind, the serpent's coil tightened around the throne. Outside the palace, the London fog swallowed the city's ancient streets, and unseen eyes watched from darkened windows. The game was afoot, and in the quiet of her chambers, Elizabeth removed her mask, her fingers lingering on the pendant that seemed to pulse with the weight of destiny. Her voice, barely a whisper, vowed, "I will not be cast aside. England's crown will be mine." But who would stand with her when the serpent struck? The answer lingered in the shadows, waiting to be revealed, and so the Tudor saga marched onward, fraught with peril, passion, and the relentless pursuit of power. The next move belonged to the players yet unseen, and the kingdom's fate hung in the balance. The dawn broke grey and unsettled over the sprawling estate of Framlingham Castle in Suffolk, where Lady Mary Tudor had taken refuge. The ancient stone walls, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, stood as silent witnesses to the turbulence that had shaped her life. Once England's treasured princess, Mary now lived under the heavy shadow of rejection and suspicion, her rightful claim to the throne dismissed by the very crown she had been born to inherit. Mary Tudor was a striking figure, a woman forged in the fires of heartbreak and steadfast faith. Her copper-gold hair caught the morning light, cascading in soft waves over her shoulders, framing a face marked by delicate yet resolute features. Her eyes, a deep hazel flecked with flecks of emerald, held a fierce intelligence tempered by years of adversity. Draped in a gown of rich burgundy velvet, embroidered with intricate gold thread, she wore the colors of her house boldly, a silent declaration of her enduring dignity. Despite the isolation imposed upon her, Mary's spirit remained unbroken. Her resolve to reclaim her birthright was fueled by an unshakable belief in divine justice and the legitimacy of her mother's marriage to Henry VIII. She spent her days in prayer and study, mastering Latin, theology, and the art of diplomacy, sharpening the weapons she would one day wield against those who sought to keep her silent. But the court, far away in the gilded chambers of London, was a different world, a place where loyalty was a currency as volatile as the shifting alliances that defined the Tudor saga. The young King Edward VI, Henry's only legitimate son, was but a boy, his fragile health and youth making him a pawn in the hands of ambitious regents. The Protestant reforms sweeping England deepened divisions, and Mary's Catholic faith rendered her both an emblem of resistance and a target of suspicion. In the cold halls of Whitehall Palace, whispers of rebellion stirred. Powerful nobles, uneasy with the rapid changes imposed by the Regency, viewed Mary as a figurehead for their cause. Yet Mary herself was cautious. She knew that open defiance could mean ruin, and so she cultivated a network of loyal supporters, balancing patience with quiet strength. Among her allies was Sir Henry Courtenay, a nobleman whose loyalty to Mary was matched only by his political acumen. His presence at court provided her with vital intelligence and a connection to the factions that still revered the old faith. Together, they plotted carefully, weaving a web of influence that stretched from the shadowed corridors of power to the distant reaches of the countryside. As summer yielded to autumn, the fragile peace shattered. The death of King Edward VI in 1553 unleashed a succession crisis that would test Mary's resolve and the very fabric of England itself. Edward's will named Lady Jane Grey, a Protestant cousin and pawn of the powerful Duke of Northumberland, as his successor, sidelining Mary and Elizabeth. Jane's brief reign was marked by uncertainty and tension. But Mary, undeterred, mobilized her supporters in East Anglia, rallying noblemen and common folk alike to her cause. Her claim was clear, her cause just, and the tide of public opinion began to turn. The streets of Ipswich and Norwich echoed with her name as towns declared for her, and her banners, red and gold with the Tudor rose, fluttered defiantly against the grey sky. The country, weary of religious turmoil and noble factionalism, sought stability, and Mary embodied the promise of restoration. A decisive moment came when London itself, the heart of England's power, cast off its allegiance to Jane Grey. The young Queen's supporters faltered, and Mary Tudor rode triumphantly into the capital, her arrival greeted with a mixture of awe and relief in the Grand Hall of the Tower of London. Mary was declared the rightful Queen of England, the first woman to claim the throne in her own right rather than as a consort. Draped in regal robes of crimson and ermine, she wore the crown with a solemn dignity. Aware of the immense challenges ahead, her early reign was marked by a cautious approach. Mary sought to heal the divisions that had fractured the kingdom, promising tolerance and stability. Yet her deep Catholic convictions soon guided her policies. She restored papal authority, repealed Protestant reforms, and revived heresy laws that harkened back to darker times. The fires of religious persecution were lit, and England bore witness to the execution of prominent Protestant leaders. The nickname Bloody Mary would echo through history, a verdict both harsh and incomplete on a queen whose intentions were entwined with her faith and the tumult of her era. Mary's personal life was shadowed by longing and disappointment. Her marriage to Philip of Spain, son of Emperor Charles V, was a political alliance fraught with tension. Though she loved him deeply, the union was marred by cultural differences and Philip's lukewarm affection. Their hopes for an heir were dashed by phantom pregnancies and court intrigues that in the twilight of her reign. Mary faced defeats abroad, the loss of Calais to France, symbolic blows that weighed heavily on her conscience. Her health declined, plagued by what modern medicine might diagnose as ovarian cancer. As autumn leaves fell, Mary Tudor, the once discarded princess, lay in the chambers of St. James's Palace, her breath shallow, her gaze distant yet unwavering. Her final act was one of grace and reconciliation, recognizing her sister Elizabeth as her successor, ensuring the continuation of the Tudor lineage despite their religious divide. When Mary died in 1558, the kingdom mourned a queen whose life was a tapestry of sorrow and strength. Buried in Westminster Abbey, she was joined in death by her sister Elizabeth, their fates entwined by blood and history. Mary Tudor's legacy is complex. A woman of principle and passion, shaped by hardship and conviction. Her reign was a crucible in which England's future was forged, a testament to resilience in a world where crowns were both prize and peril. Yet as the bells tolled her passing, the stage was set for a new queen, a flame-haired monarch whose brilliance and resolve would illuminate England's path for decades to come. Elizabeth Tudor awaited her moment, ready to step from the shadows of history into the glare of the crown.